So I was away for a few days at a writing retreat in San Francisco, and it was great. I got to meet a lot of lovely people. I was with beautiful friends and met some great writers, and it was just it was a great time. The cost of that, though, for the channel was that I'm a little bit behind schedule for this week's run of Halloween season movies. But no matter, there's plenty of time to get back on track. So let's get to it. Today's movie, Frankenhooker. It's such a weird title. But let's talk about it. My youngest niece brought this movie to my attention. I know immediately when she brought it up, I put it on my list of movies and told myself I was going to watch it one day. And I've done that. And now it's time to discuss it. By the way, Ace, love you. But yes, Frankenhooker. So this movie is kind of wild. And actually, wild is probably not the best word to describe this movie. It's kind of bonkers. It is bonkers. This movie is it's out of control. But it is a black comedy horror film, and that's the kind of stuff that you're going to get from a film like this. Having said that, there are actually some really strong merits on display of this movie. The biggest thing I think that surprised me about this movie is the budget. I read somewhere the budget was like $2.5 million, which feels like a lot for this movie. I have a sense that this movie could have been made for less money, but I think though the more I think about it though, I'm thinking about particularly the like prosthetics and the visual effects and how that might have been where a lot of the money went, outside of the crew and, actors. So before I get into all of that, I should probably tell you what this movie's about. Didn't get there. We have the story of a young man, Jeffrey Franken, played by James Lawrence. He is a failed medical student who is a part-time scientist. He has a girlfriend named Elizabeth, played by Patty Mullen, and she is criticized for her weight, which honestly is not really an issue, but that's beside the point. So she's criticized about her weight or whatever. And she suffers a tragic lawnmower accident. And, Jeffrey decides to put her back together. But he puts her back together with the parts of other women who happen to be sex workers. And hence the title, Frankenhooker. The details for how you get there are not important, but they do offer a unique parody on this age-old story about the concept of reanimation. What's added here, though, is there's conversations about women's rights to their bodies and what's happening to them. And it's presented in a way that is funny and kind of out there. So that's what's happening. I mentioned earlier the budget, which led to a conversation about the visual effects and how a lot of the money might have gone to that. I have to say, again, there's really strong visual effects on display in this movie. For 1990, it looks pretty good. They do seem a little bit dated, but for the most part, they hold up fairly well. Hands look like really well sculpted hands. Feet, same thing. The body parts, limbs and things looks really convincing. And even though it's clear, you can tell the difference between what is actually real, what's tactile, and what is sort of man-made in terms of the body parts and things. I think just for the visual of it, it's a practical effect, and that's pretty good for that time. Obviously, computer-generated images weren't to the level that they are now, so you couldn't use that as a tool in the same way. But I think given what humans are pretty amazing, that they can take the time to craft things like that, even for something as silly as this, and make it look convincing. which really at the end of the day, it goes a long way because it's something you can see, and you see actors physically interacting with what's there. They're holding it, they're touching it, it's hitting them in the face, all kinds of things are happening. So the idea gets across. I wouldn't be surprised if I learned that a lot of the money for this project went to that, because that's a ton of hours that you have to put into crafting something. Whatever company was dealing with that for the arms and stuff and legs and junk they did a pretty good job. For as weird as this movie is in a lot of places, there is decent acting, I think, on display. There's pockets of acting that does not take you out. Even though this is a parody and it's supposed to be kind of silly, I couldn't help but taking certain parts seriously. James Lawrence, who plays the boyfriend, Jeffrey Franken, he actually, for the most part, his acting felt to me like something you might have come across in an adult film from that time. He's always mumbling and saying things to himself, and he's doing little weird things about how he's conducting his experiments and stuff. But there are pockets of genuine sincerity that really hit me. But the real star, I think, is probably Patty Mullen. She probably has the most dynamic transition in the movie, obviously, because she's Elizabeth in the beginning. She's just the typical girlfriend, and she plays her that. Her line delivery though is great. And then when we see her again, when she's obviously been put back together, the first leg of her sort of new life, she plays out some of the scenarios from a bunch of the other women who she's put together from. And that's at once it's hilarious, and also there's something oddly tragic about it. Like, it's something sad about it, because she's reanimated, but she's not herself. She's not who Jeffrey wanted her to be. He's remembering Elizabeth, and this is not that person. She just comes out regurgitating phrases from the women who we've already met, from the other different women we've already met. She's been reduced down to just like, she's an amalgam of different sex workers, and everything she says is surrounded by that. And if you can't give her, anything that sort of feeds that, you're in trouble. And that's where some of the humor comes into. It's quite funny. It's weird, but it's hilarious. So A+ on the humor from that. But I think Patty Mullen does a great job. The other actor I want to point out is Joseph Gonzalez. He plays Zeus. He's one of the antagonists, you might say, of this movie. He's the guy who basically owns all the women that we see Jeffrey interacting with in the sort of the sex work world or whatever it is. His acting felt wooden. It was a little bit wooden, but that was funny too. That made it funny. And he's just big, buff, muscly guy, and so his physical movements added to the humor. Every time he was on screen and doing something, he seemed so, or at least excluding the first time we meet him. Every time after that, he's much more hilarious to me. One of the things that comes up for me all the time in any parody movie is how serious they're going to take it. I mentioned there's some degree of seriousness that I couldn't help but bring to it. This isn't a movie you're supposed to take 100% seriously because, again, it is a comedy. So I think if you haven't seen it and you're curious about it, it's one of those movies that you experience it. You don't think too much. Don't think too much. I think you'll enjoy it less if you think too much. There are things to enjoy about it, and it's a little weird, but that's a good thing too. If you like weird things, weird movies, sort of off kilter things, this is that kind of movie. You have people talking to just heads, heads that are not attached to bodies, having dinner with them and stuff like that, like having full relationships with heads, and it's something to watch for sure. So again, you can't take that kind of thing seriously. Having said that, some of the things that came up for me just made me think about some stuff. For instance, there's a conversation about grief and how far grief will drive someone. This is not an overt conversation. I just mentioned in the film, Jeffrey has a moment with his mother, and she's trying to get him to move on and see other people, and he has a heart-to-heart with her where he opens up and expresses to her the different things he's thinking and feeling in the wake of his girlfriend's death. And Jeffrey shares a couple things in that conversation that allude to the fact that he's beginning to, lose focus on different things, like what's right, what's wrong, and where his he's going a little bit mad, a little bit, which is for this, the context of this, you need kind of a mad scientist person to embark on the experiments that he's going to be doing if he wants to bring back his girlfriend. So you have to kind of be a little bit not fully in your right frame of mind. So there's that. That came up, just how, depending on how you hold grief, that got a little bit earnest and a little bit sincere for me. Like in this like funny movie, that was a moment of like, oh shoot, he really loved that girl. He's really going to try to. He's got the ability to try to do that, to bring her back. I think this is something that, if you're thinking about it in a unhumorous way, I think people, if you had that power, you probably would do that. If you love somebody that much, you would probably try to bring that person back if you could. The other thing that comes up is there is a conversation in this movie about what came up for me around it, about sex work, women's bodies, and what drugs are doing to women's bodies, and then also ultimately how much control women have over their bodies. Again, this is not an overt thing that comes up in the movie, but there is a conversation about legalizing prostitution, so that the women who end up going into that work aren't getting punished for that. And this movie has detractors from that idea, that the cost of that would be, taxpayers paying for condoms, or paying for the hotels where the work would transpire. That's there just for the plot of the movie, because that's an area where Jeffrey will have to. It's, if you think about it, at least certainly in that time, the early 1990s, there was still it was kind of heavier. There's a darker world of sex work where women who are involved in that work they're out there, and maybe there are less people looking for them. They are exposed to dangers. So where you might get in trouble, you might get assaulted, you might get murdered, there's a whole bunch of different things that can happen when you're in that work, exposed. And so there's a woman in this movie who is speaking to why sex work should be legalized, and ultimately offer protections for the women in the field. That on its own, it speaks to me about, a longer conversation, just an age-old conversation about women's bodies and who has the right over their bodies. They should have the right. They should have rights. It's their stuff. It's their bodies, whatever it is. But there's a lot of stuff going on that prevent them from fully having that. The funny thing about that is the the group that this advocate is a part of is a group called Hookers, which is funny. It's on its own. It's kind of like, what? That's a group. But the funnier thing to me is that it actually sounds like a the group name on its own is not funny. What's funnier about it is that what the acronym means, which is like, I think it's hold on to our knowledge of equal rights, which it sounds like this very serious, take this group seriously, because they're talking about, their rights as women in society, and they should have control of those rights. And yet at this time they don't. And I think it's funny that Jeffrey agrees, and he will ultimately end up exploiting the fact that the women don't have rights, because they do end up in some sticky situations, which allows him to get the resources he needs for his experiments and things. And then, of course, when you see where the movie ends up, it says to me, this is not obviously what the movie was going for, but when I saw it, it spoke to me about the men in power who've always been in power when it came to different laws and legislative actions that deal with women and their rights, and how the men are in control of that. They get to say yes or no to whatever they get to vote into law, what bills or whatever. And how if the roles were reversed, I think if men were in that situation, it would be a different conversation. I think that the movie leaves you on this. It's played for laughs here in this movie, but I think there's something, certainly watching it now, it gives us this other context of what that could look like. So it left me with something to think about in a funny way, but also there's some truth to the idea that it would be a very different conversation. Yes. So Frankenhooker, if you've seen it, I want to know. Let me know what you think. I have to talk to my niece about it because we didn't talk about it because she wanted me to see it. But now that I've seen it, I'll be eager to talk to her about it. And again, let me know if you've seen it, what you think. Frankenhooker, it's one of those ones. It's going to get you. But as always, if you've stuck around this long, I appreciate your time. Thank you for watching this review. But stay tuned. More reviews on the way for Halloween season. I'm getting out of here for now. In the meantime, take it easy, and I'll see you in the next video.